It's been a while, hasn't it? Well, sometimes I do end up thinking back to November 2015, back when I thought I was going to have the Terminator 3 The Redemption review ready by the end of the month. But after unexpected life events, mountains of schoolwork, needing to take care of my dog I had just gotten at the time, and being roped into a Let's Play series that I got more and more burned out on, to the point where it felt like more fucking homework instead of a fun Let's Play series like it should have been, the Terminator 3 review did not get finished until July of 2017, almost a full 2 years later. And after that, I just didn't know what to do next with this little review series of mine. But I'm happy to say that an April Fool's joke, a surprising amount of support, a declining interest in making Let's Play videos and live streams, and a very particular game I bought set off the perfect storm. That's right, the Shnick review show has returned, at least for the time being. Now, about that particular game. It's probably not a game you expected me to talk about. It's not Shrek on Xbox, the Family Guy game, Finding Nemo, or stupid Walt Disney Fuck Quest. No. Instead, it's actually Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, a very recent fighting game developed by indie studio Enway and released on the PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. Now, I'm sure the Power Rangers franchise needs no introduction. Somehow, a kids show featuring superheroes in spandex fighting a wide variety of ridiculous-looking monsters using footage from a Japanese franchise called Super Sentai is still going strong after almost 30 years on the air. And honestly, that's probably just because it has its own unique charm to it, with both kids and a very dedicated adult fanbase having enjoyed the hell out of it for those 30 years. Even if the series does have missteps on occasion. When I was a kid, I watched Power Rangers Time Force and Ninja Storm religiously. And recently I've taken a liking to In Space and Lost Galaxy, plus I have access to various other seasons on DVD too. I also had the Time Force PS1 game and Super Legends on the PS2, but I don't exactly remember how they hold up today. As for Battle for the Grid, I'll admit that I had my doubts about the game when it was first announced. It honestly just looked like a cheap license game that was being made to half-heartedly promote the series' 25th anniversary. It also didn't help that for a franchise with a wide variety of characters to choose from, the game was going to have less than 10 characters at launch. There was just too many red flags for me to even consider picking up the game, and sure enough, the game got a fairly mediocre reaction from both critics and the fanbase at launch. But surprisingly, the developers actually stuck with the game, and with a year having passed since launch, both the fanbase and the fighting game community have become a lot more positive towards the game, despite it still having some shortcomings. That brings us to the present day, where I, having had a reinvigorated interest in the Power Rangers series and striving for a new game to buy since I've kind of run out of ideas of what to get, I finally decided to give Battle for the Grid a try and bought it during a sale. So how is the game as of April of 2020? Well, I think it's pretty well made. Not perfect, mind you, but I feel like I got my money's worth. The game itself has 3 main modes of play: online matches, a story mode, and an arcade mode. Admittedly, part of the reason I was hesitant to buy this game is due to the lack of substantial content. I don't want to say I don't like playing games online, as I will sometimes play the Call of Duty games, and even fighting games like Tekken and Marvel vs. Capcom online. But still, by not having much content, I was still on the fence about thinking the game would be worth it. But once again, very few games catch my interest these days, so I decided to take the chance. The first thing I tried out was the arcade mode in order to get a feel for the gameplay. What I was greeted with was a fairly simple fighting system that heavily resembled Marvel vs. Capcom, specifically 2 and 3. Fights in Battle for the Grid are usually 3 versus 3 except for certain events in the arcade and story mode, and you have the ability to freely tag in your inactive characters as either an assist or to switch them into your control. As for the controls themselves, the 4 face buttons can pull off various attacks as normal for a fighting game, while L1 and R1 are used for tagging, and L2 and R2 are used to pull off super moves similar to Marvel vs. Capcom. Now, I'm no expert on fighting game mechanics, so I can't really go into much detail as to how the gameplay works. What I can say is that the combat feels simple, yet very rewarding for those who manage to master it. Hell, despite the game's small roster of only 18 characters, including the DLC, each character feels very unique with their own movesets and their own feeling to them, if that makes sense. Which may actually be the trade-off of having so few characters. I feel that many other fighting games out there with larger character rosters have at least several characters that are at least somewhat similar to each other, or perhaps are just outright clone characters. So, needless to say, I was really surprised at just how unique the characters in this game were. You have the red Mighty Morphin Ranger primarily using quick sword and martial arts skills, the pink Mighty Morphin Ranger primarily using a moveset centered around a bow and arrow, the Magna Defender being a slow but heavy hitter, the Dragon Armor being a fast heavy hitter, and the White Mystic Force Ranger being this game's version of Sub-Zero from Mortal Kombat. Even Tommy Oliver and Lord Draken, who are just alternate versions of the same character, have an almost completely different moveset from each other, except for maybe this one super move being a bit similar. For the most part, I really enjoyed getting to try out each character the game had to offer, even if I royally sucked with a few of them. After trying out the arcade mode, I ended up going online to try the game's ranked battle mode. Getting into games was actually pretty easy, likely due to the game's crossplay feature that was thankfully added to the PS4 version back in February 2020. The first thing the game does is put you through 3 battles against a CPU, followed by 5 battles against actual players in order to assess your skills. I actually ended up doing better than I thought I was going to do, and ended up placing in Gold tier, with the tier system basically representing one part of a progression system that goes alongside a player level and individual levels for the characters that make up the player level. There aren't that many rewards from this progression system other than banners to use on your profile, plus trophies and achievements on the PS4, Xbox One, and PC versions. As a result, most of the fun to be had with the online mode is, well, playing the online mode. But god damn, it actually felt very exhilarating to play the game against other people. Of course, I'm not the best at fighting games as I mentioned before, and I definitely got my ass handed to me quite often. But the times that I did end up winning felt very rewarding within themselves, and that's just because the gameplay feels satisfying. I forgot to mention this earlier, but the game manages to portray the fights from the show pretty damn accurately by recreating many of the finishing moves and even having certain attacks cause sparks to fly from your opponent, like in the show. Granted, some effects apparently had to be added via updates, but god damn if it wasn't worth it. The last thing I can cover is the game's story mode. The story itself is presented through cutscenes in the style of a motion comic and text boxes with character portraits before, during, and after the actual fights. I should probably mention now that only a few actors from the show return to reprise their roles, namely Austin St. John, Jason David Frank, David J. Fielding, Kerrigan Mahan, and Dan Southworth. Oh, speaking of that, I swear to God that Dan Southworth and the developers gave in to fan demand and had him voice some of his lines similar to Virgil from Devil May Cry, another role that Dan Southworth has played. And if that's true, then that is freaking awesome.
I need more power. I need more quantum power.
Getting back to the story, I believe it's supposed to be an adaptation of a story from the comics rather than the show itself. That might explain why some of the content is darker than what you'd see in the show, including permanent on-screen death, more frequent usage of the word kill. There's even a character that drops an "oh my god" at one point. I mean, I know it's not really a curse word, but had I seen this as a kid, I would have gone crazy over seeing the word God being used on a kid's TV show. The story itself is relatively basic. You have Lord Draken, a version of Tommy Oliver from an alternate dimension, threatening to destroy the whole multiverse by gaining control of the morphing grid all the Power Rangers draw their power from. So of course, Rangers from various teams have to join together to stop him. It's nothing too deep, but it does capture the spirit of the show well. Honestly, through my brief time playing this game, I could clearly see that the developers really do care about the franchise, as there's frequent references that accurately portray the show, and even trivia facts are displayed in between online fights. The story itself does kind of just pad itself out with tons and tons of fights, but it was still nice to have at least a little more offline content. Now, while I really do enjoy the gameplay, as I said before, the experience is not perfect. First of all, when playing games online, I noticed that it was incredibly easy to get stun-locked into an infinite combo. Anytime an opponent managed this, there would be very little I could do to break out of the combo. For some reason, you can't even call your assists when being attacked, and while I'm sure there's some mechanical purpose for this, it just doesn't feel right to me. Maybe this is more common than I thought in fighting games, and maybe I just don't have mad skills like the pros do, but I feel that players should at least be able to do something to break out of this kind of infinite combo. By the way, I should confess I'm not just bringing this up because I got my ass kicked often. There were also times when I, too, ended up being guilty of stun-locking opponents. In addition, this kind of goes without saying, but I really wish the game had more content available. I understand that the game was developed by an indie studio that has a very limited budget to work with, but it would still be nice to see an extra offline mode or two be added to the game. Though, given the recent trend of fighting games cutting out single-player content in favor of focusing on online multiplayer and esports, I probably shouldn't hold my breath. Also, it seems that the online servers can be, let's be nice and say, unstable at times. Often when starting a game online, I would get booted out of the game with an error code. Hell, this would even sometimes happen to my opponent, which would result in me being declared the winner of the game. On some occasions when this happened, it meant I couldn't even play online for a short period since it would just keep happening every time I tried to enter another session. So I would end up falling back on the arcade mode to get some action. I don't know if these issues are a result of crossplay or if the developer has to work with crappy servers, but it's still annoying whenever it happens. One last complaint I have is more of a nitpick, but I honestly think there's way too many characters from the original Mighty Morphin era. Now, I understand that Mighty Morphin Power Rangers is the most recognizable series out of the whole franchise, having started the whole franchise to begin with, but with the franchise having so many characters to choose from over the years, how is it that 6 of the 18 currently available characters are from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers? Hell, there's technically 8 if you count Lord Draken and the Mastodon Soldier. Needless to say, if more characters do get added to the game, I think they should come from other Ranger seasons. Aside from that, I actually found Battle for the Grid to be pretty enjoyable. It's not much different from what you can get in other fighting games, but if you're a Power Rangers fan and like fighting games, I'd say getting this on sale like I did would be worth it. As I said before, I really do wish it had more offline content, even though that's apparently too much to ask for from fighting games these days. But even still, I wouldn't mind plowing through the arcade mode every now and then, even if the online community ends up dying at some point. I also appreciate the fact that the developers are well aware that they made a smaller scale game, and thus sell the base game for only $20. That's already far better than Dissidia Final Fantasy NT in my book. All in all, I had a fun time getting to experience Battle for the Grid, at least while its community was still active. And hopefully my return to reviewing games can continue for at least a little while longer. Speaking of which, I know of a very particular shitty game I can look at next. A game I don't understand the appeal of, and personally, the game that fucking killed my childhood PS1.